The town didn't have a name Johnny recognized. Somewhere in eastern Kentucky, tucked into the hills where the roads twisted like old rope and the houses sat far apart, connected more by habit than proximity. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were noticed before they'd even parked their car. Johnny had stopped because his bus needed gas, and the only station for 30 miles was here. While his driver filled the tank, Johnny stepped out to stretch his legs. The afternoon sun hung low and golden, painting everything in that particular light that makes the present feel like memory. Main Street was 3 blocks long. A hardware store, a diner with a hand-painted sign, a barber shop with a striped pole that looked like it hadn't turned since Truman was president. And at the end of the street, set back slightly from the others, a music shop. The sign above the door read Harper's Music, since 1949, in faded gold letters. The paint was peeling. One of the windows had a crack running through it, patched with yellowed tape, but something about it pulled at Johnny. Maybe it was the old guitar hanging in the window, a Gibson from the looks of it, sunburst finish catching the light. Maybe it was just the universal gravity that music shops have for people who've spent their lives around instruments. He pushed open the door. A bell chimed, the old-fashioned kind, brass, with a sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 entrances and exits. Inside, the shop was dim and cluttered. Guitars hung from the walls like sleeping birds. A drum kit sat in one corner, covered with a sheet. Amplifiers stacked against the back wall. Sheet music in wire racks. The smell of wood and old varnish and dust and time. Behind the counter sat a man who looked like he'd been there since the sign was painted. 70s, maybe older. Thick glasses, flannel shirt, hands that had the worn, smooth look of someone who'd worked with tools their whole life. "Help you?" he asked, looking up from a guitar he was restringing. "Just looking," Johnny said, keeping his hat low. He wasn't sure if the man recognized him. Sometimes it was nice to just be a customer. "Take your time, not like we're busy." Johnny moved through the shop slowly, running his fingers along guitar necks, reading the handwritten price tags. A 1965 Fender Telecaster, $450. A Martin D28, $800. Prices that spoke to a time when instruments were investments, not collectibles. In the back corner, behind a stack of amplifiers and beneath a shelf of harmonicas, Johnny saw another guitar case. Old, brown leather, cracked and faded. The kind of case that had seen miles of bad roads. He pulled it out carefully, set it on an empty amplifier. The latches were stiff with age, but they opened. Inside, cradled in faded purple velvet, was an acoustic guitar. It was beautiful in the way old things are beautiful, not pristine, but honest. The wood was darkened with age and handling. The strings were rusted. The pickguard was worn almost white where countless picks had struck it. This guitar had been played, loved, then forgotten. Johnny lifted it out carefully. The weight felt right in his hands. He turned it over, examining the back, the sides, the neck. Then he looked inside the sound hole, and his blood went cold. Carved into the wood inside the guitar's body, crude but deliberate, were the words, "Johnny Cash, 1957. Johnny's hands trembled slightly. He read it again. Then, a third time. His name. His birth name. Not the man in black. Not the country music star. Just his name. And a year. 1957. He would have been 25 in 1957. I Walk the Line had come out the year before. He'd been touring constantly, playing anywhere that would book him. But he'd never been to this town. He was certain of it. And he'd never owned a guitar like this, never carved his name inside one. So whose was it? And why did it have his name? Johnny looked up. The old man was watching him now, curiosity in his eyes. "Find something interesting?" Johnny walked to the counter, carrying the guitar carefully. Set it down. "This guitar, how long have you had it?" The old man leaned forward, squinting through his glasses. "Oh, that one. That's been here. Lord, must be 20 years now. Maybe more. Never could sell it." "Why not?" "Well, it plays fine. Nothing wrong with it mechanically, but—" He trailed off, picking up the guitar and examining it like he was seeing it for the first time in years. I suppose it was always waiting for the right person. Never felt right selling it to just anyone. Where did it come from? The old man set the guitar down gently, looked at Johnny more carefully now, really looked. And something shifted in his expression. Recognition. You're him, aren't you? Johnny Cash. Johnny nodded slowly. The old man was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think you should talk to my wife. Her name was Margaret Harper. She came down from the apartment above the shop, moving slowly with a cane, but with eyes that were sharp and clear. She was probably in her 70s, with white hair pulled back in a bun, and the kind of face that holds both kindness and sorrow in equal measure. Her husband, Bill, he'd introduced himself, gestured to the guitar on the counter. Show her what you found. Margaret looked at the guitar, then at Johnny. Then she sat down in an old wooden chair near the counter and folded her hands in her lap. I wondered if you'd ever come here, she said quietly. Ma'am, I don't understand. This guitar has my name in it, from 1957, but I've never been to this town. Never owned this guitar. No, Margaret said. You didn't, but my brother did. She gestured to a photograph on the wall behind the counter. Johnny hadn't noticed it before. It was small, black and white, tucked among the other pictures of customers and events. It showed a young man, maybe 19 or 20, holding that same guitar. Dark hair, thin face, eyes that held something both hopeful and sad. That's Thomas, Margaret said. Tommy, my little brother. He bought that guitar in 1956. Saved up for 8 months working at the sawmill. When he finally had enough money, he came in here. This was our father's shop then, and bought it. I remember the look on his face, like he'd been given the keys to heaven. She paused, lost in memory. Tommy wanted to be a musician, wanted it more than anything. He taught himself to play, listening to the radio every night. And when I Walk the Line came out, she smiled sadly. He must have played that record 1,000 times, wore it out, had to buy another copy. He said your music made him feel like maybe he could do it too, like maybe a boy from the hills could make something of himself with just a guitar and a voice. Johnny felt something tight in his chest. He'd heard stories like this before, people telling him how his music had touched them, but this felt different, more personal, more urgent. In 1957, Margaret continued, Tommy decided he was going to Nashville, going to try to make it. He practiced every day, wrote songs, made plans. And one night, he took a knife and carved your name inside that guitar. Said it was like a promise, like having you with him, reminding him why he was doing this. She stopped, took a breath. Her husband put his hand on her shoulder. What happened? Johnny asked quietly. He never made it to Nashville. 3 days before he was supposed to leave, there was an accident at the sawmill. A machine malfunction. Tommy was... She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. The shop was silent except for the ticking of a clock somewhere in the back. He was 21 years old, Margaret said. Had his whole life ahead of him. Had that guitar and his dreams, and 3 days before he was supposed to leave. Johnny looked at the guitar, at the name carved inside it, at the promise that had never been kept. After he died, Margaret continued, I couldn't bear to get rid of the guitar. It was his most precious thing, but I couldn't keep it in the house either. Hurt too much to look at. So I brought it here, to the shop. Thought maybe I'd sell it eventually. But, she shook her head, every time someone showed interest, I'd find some reason to say no. Wrong person, wrong price, something. I think I was waiting, though I didn't know what for. She looked at Johnny now, really looked at him. And then you walk in here, 23 years later, like something brought you. Johnny sat down heavily on a stool. His mind was racing. 1957, a young man with dreams, a guitar with a promise carved inside it, a journey that never happened, a life cut short. Can I? Johnny had to clear his throat. Can I play it? Margaret nodded. Johnny picked up the guitar. The strings were rusted, but he tuned them as best he could. Then, sitting there in that dusty music shop, with the afternoon light slanting through the windows, he played. He played I Walk the Line. Slow and quiet, the guitar's tone was warm despite its age. Rich, full of character, the kind of sound that only comes from years of being played with love. When he finished, Margaret was crying silently. Bill had his arm around her shoulders. That's the first time anyone's played that guitar since Tommy died, she said. Johnny set the guitar down carefully. He felt the weight of what he was about to ask, but he knew it was right. "Mrs. Harper, would you let me buy this guitar?" She looked startled. "Buy it? Mr. Cash, I can't ask you to. Please, I'd like to take it with me. Play it. Give it the life your brother wanted it to have. Let it see Nashville. Let it be heard. Let it matter." Margaret looked at her husband. Something passed between them, a conversation without words that only people who'd been married for decades could have. "We can't sell it to you," Bill said finally. Johnny's heart sank. But then Bill continued, "But we can give it to you, on one condition. Anything. You play it. You make music with it. You let Tommy's dream live through you." Johnny felt tears in his own eyes now. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Margaret stood slowly, walked to the guitar, and ran her hand along its neck one last time. "Thank you," she whispered. To Johnny, to her brother, to the universe that had brought them together. Thank you for giving him a purpose, for making him believe, even if it was just for a little while. Johnny left the shop with the guitar in its case. The sun was setting now, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. His bus was waiting, but he stood there for a moment, holding the case, feeling its weight. Inside was more than wood and strings. Inside was a young man's hope, a dream that had been interrupted, but not forgotten, a promise that had waited 23 years to be kept. Johnny thought about all the towns he'd been to, all the people he'd met, all the lives that had touched his without him knowing. How many Tommies were out there? How many people had carved his name into their hearts, their hopes, their instruments? The weight of it was enormous. The responsibility of being heard, of mattering to people he'd never meet, of carrying their dreams forward when they couldn't carry them themselves. But it was a weight he was willing to bear. That night, in a hotel room in Cincinnati, Johnny wrote a song. He played it on Tommy's guitar, because that's what it was now. Tommy's guitar, even though it belonged to Johnny. Some things carry the name of the person who loved them first. The song was about dreamers who don't get their chance, about promises kept across time, about the invisible threads that connect us to people we've never met, about the sacred trust of being someone's hope. He called it The Guitar That Waited. It was never a hit, never played much on the radio, but the people who heard it, really heard it, said it was one of Johnny's most honest songs, said there was something different in his voice when he sang it, something raw and true. Johnny kept Tommy's guitar for the rest of his life, played it on albums, took it on tour, let it see all the places Tommy never got to see, let it be heard by all the people Tommy never got to play for. And whenever someone asked him about it, about the old acoustic with the worn pickguard and the name carved inside, Johnny would tell them about a music shop in Kentucky, about a young man with a dream, about how sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we take for people who can't take them themselves. Years later, when Johnny was old and his health was failing, he had the guitar sent back to Kentucky, back to the shop, which was still standing, though Bill had passed and Margaret ran it with the help of her son. With it was a note. "This guitar has been to Nashville, has been on stages across the world, has been heard by millions, has lived the dream that Tommy carved into its heart. Thank you for trusting me with it. Thank you for letting me carry him with me. Some promises take a lifetime to keep. I hope I kept this one right." Margaret hung the guitar on the wall of the shop. Not for sale, just there. A testament to dreams and music and the mysterious ways that lives intersect across time and distance. And sometimes, late at night when the shop was closed, she'd take it down and play a few chords, just to keep the strings alive, just to remind the wood that it had mattered, that Tommy had mattered, that dreams, even deferred, even interrupted, even carved into the quiet places where only we can see them, still matter, still echo, still endure.